When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 7, A Mother's Perspective of Her Teen's Mental Health Voyage. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. It is with pleasure that I introduce you to our brave guest, Khayali Dhanji. Diagnosed with major depressive disorder as a preteen, Neilin has spent most of her life battling through mental health and the fog that comes with it. Today, after more than 25 years, she is in what she calls a remission, thanks to a combined approach incorporating therapy, medication, and healthy lifestyle choices. Her own journey has prepared her to walk alongside her daughter, a daughter who now grapples with her own diagnosis of generalized anxiety and major depressive disorders. Neilin also has a son and is happily married to her high school sweetheart. She can often be found cooking and baking or taking an incessant amount of photos. This is an especially warm welcome to Neilin, who is the mother of our earlier guest, Khayali Dhanji, who so eloquently shared the depth of her own mental health journey. With Khayali's permission, her mom, Neilin, is here to give us her take on this mental health voyage that is parallel to both of them. Hey, Neilin, welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thanks, Salima. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, the pleasure is all mine. I am so grateful to have you on the show and for your willingness to share and your support for taking a stance to help and break barriers of mental stigma.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you know, Neilin, this podcast is about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter what the story is all about, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way which remains tucked away. And so this platform serves in a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So we are here really encouraging people to share and tell what individuals typically have reluctance for revealing. So Neilin, I can't wait to get started. You ready?
I am ready. Yes.
Awesome. All right. So the first question is, can you give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story? How would it read?
So, if I were to pick one title, I
Mm-hmm.
would say My Journey is Her Journey. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I say that is as much as it's been my journey and my road walking along this, it really has been a supportive role or a secondary role. it really has been Khayali's journey, and she's really sort of had to take the lead on it. And it's tough to relinquish control, but that's really what I've had to do, and just sort of
Mm-hmm.
relinquish control and adapt to her and adapt to what she needs. Let her take the lead, let her guide me, and let me know what she needs. So it really has been me adapting to her and just trying to figure out what it is that she needs.
Mm-hmm. So your child is in the driver's seat.
Absolutely. I barely even in the passenger seat. I think I might be somewhere in the trunk, just sort of along for the ride.
Well, when you say my journey is her journey, this is a compelling headline. And the way you explain this parallel process, the parallel journey, of how you adapt and the process of everything that's in between, just tells that it is so much more about the process, more so than outcome.
Absolutely. It really is a journey.
Right. So tell us what your untold story is all about.
So I would probably say it started a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We noticed that there was something going on with Kayali. It just things were a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my own experience with clinical depression, I recognized it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I saw all the signs, I saw all the symptoms, I knew exactly what was going on and what was happening to her. Automatically, my mind went to the struggles that I had had with mental health and all the pain I had felt along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And, immediately how Kayali would now have to endure that same pain.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to see your child in pain. You always, I feel like the role and the purpose of a parent is to give your child a better life than you had. You always want better for them.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to learn the same lessons and have the same blessings. But if you could take out that struggle part in between to get to those lessons, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
your goal. So it was really tough on me to see that she would have to live the same life that I did and have all those same struggles that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately as a parent, I went into guilt mode. Like I fully went mama guilt.
Right.
And I was like, are these my genes that got passed down? Did she notice when I was feeling depressed or anxious and now she's sort
Mm-hmm.
of carrying those same feelings with her? Did she pick up on my, lack of coping skills and has now gotten that? So, when you say, nature versus nurture, I double screwed up because I screwed up her nature and I screwed up her nurture. So I
Mm.
just felt so much guilt and fear and panic and completely overwhelmed.
Right.
And then I sort of had this aha moment where I realized that, you know, again, this goes back to the title, right? This is not my journey. This is her
Mm-hmm.
journey. I did not have the time or the space to make this about me. It didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
how we got here or where we got to
Mm-hmm.
and what role I played in it. The fact of the matter is that my child was suffering and she was
Mm-hmm.
in acute suffering. Like this was immediate and needed action right away. And so I really sort of needed to put my ego aside and say, this is
Mm-hmm.
not about you. You need to put this away and you need to be there for Kayali and what she needs. And now is not the time for you to worry about you. And so that was really sort of the mode that I went into.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to be her mom, and that was the only thing I needed to be.
Uh-huh. And you've got me curious, Nailene. What did you first notice about yourself when you had that aha moment, recognizing that you didn't need to take on the guilt or to make it about yourself? So, what was it that you first noticed that got you there?
You know, it wasn't productive. Me carrying guilt or me worrying about, what I did in the past, it was very, very unproductive. It wasn't going to resolve anything, it wasn't going to solve anything.
Mm-hmm.
What needed to happen was action. And me taking on guilt and making it about me and sitting in that was passive, not active.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I sort of saw is my biggest fear was that mental health has this stigma to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want Kayali to have to get stuck in that. And
Mm-hmm.
although it's gotten better over the last few years, it's still sort of there. And I didn't want Kayali to feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted her to know that she was okay because depression is okay. And
Mm-hmm.
if she was going to sort of be in this journey, she was going to get it from all sides, right? So
Right.
from the community, from other kids, from other parents. it was just going to be something that just is attached with so much stigma. So I knew
Mhm.
that I had to sort of change that narrative. And so we talked about mental health in the house a lot. We talked about my
Mhm.
mental health. I talked about things that, and again, I didn't want to keep it that my kids were carrying a burden or my kids were afraid for me or scared for
Mhm.
me or felt like they needed to take care of me because they were the
Mhm.
kids and I was the parent. But
Right.
but we wanted to know that it's okay to have these conversations in the house. It's okay to talk about this. So I talked about my
Mhm.
depression. I told my stories. I explained my thoughts.
Mhm.
And then I went and I shared my story publicly. So I actually went onto social media and did what I
Mhm.
called Truth Bomb Tuesdays. And it's where I
Mhm.
told my stories and my experiences. And I received a lot of feedback about, oh, it must be so empowering for you to have done this, or that's quite a strong statement that you're making, or this
Mhm.
will help so many other people. And none of that really sort of came into mind for me. I just
Mhm.
knew that if Kayali was going to survive this, she needed to know that depression was okay, mental health was okay, anxiety was
Mhm.
okay, talking about it, letting people help, because people can't help if
Mhm.
they don't know, right? And
Right.
I needed her to know that all of that was okay. So that was my pure motivation. I just wanted her to know that I didn't think of it as my dirty little secret, and it didn't need to be her dirty little secret.
Right.
And she could go and she could talk to people about it, and she could go to her teachers and say, look, this is what I'm struggling with right now, how can we do it? Or she can go to her friends and say, this is what I'm struggling right now, and I'm really sorry that I'm canceling plans on you last minute, but this is just the
Mhm.
space that I'm in right now.
Mhm.
So I,
Mhm.
I really wanted her to get that feeling, and kids are stubborn that way. They don't listen to what you say,
Mhm.
they listen to what you do. And so I could sit there and tell her until I was blue in the face that
Mhm.
what she was experiencing was okay.
Mhm.
But I felt like I needed to really sort of talk the talk and walk the walk. The other
Mhm.
thing was it also allowed me to share the positives that had come out of my journey. And although she was just at the beginning of it and wasn't able to quite see what was going to happen at the end of it, I wanted her to know that there was an end to the journey
Mhm.
and the gratitude that I had, right?
Mhm.
And I did have so many things that to be grateful for because of my depression, because of what I went through. That's what shaped me to be who I am
Right.
today, the mom I am today, the woman I am today. And it helped me to fully really understand what Kaylee was going through, and for Kaylee to know that I understood what she was going through, because she wasn't relaying it to a third person. I had a first person account of what she was
Mhm.
feeling and what she was going through. So there was some, I got some points for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing you really speak with fierceness, but like a gentle fierceness, like a gentle warrior, where you were very proactive when you realized that there was some action that needed, and you rectified whatever needed to be rectified, that you felt, okay, well, this is what's already shown up. So here's the stance I'm going to take. And so when I asked you the question a couple moments ago about, what you first noticed about yourself, I really heard you say it was really transitioning into action mode. So leaving the passive aside, whether it was good, bad, right, wrong, whatever, and really getting into like a grounded, active stance where you knew that you were doing this for your daughter. And I hear a great amount of inner strength when you speak about focusing on your daughter and her experience to be as truthful as possible. It also seems like, you were really trying to support her in a way without being plagued with like the stigmas or associating shame in her process. And then, even though you may have only been intending to help your daughter and using the social media platforms to amplify this message in everything that you believe that opposes mental health stigmas, I'm certain that you must have impacted so many more beyond such a solid front and center message to your daughter. What was that like for you?
That was such a wonderful and amazing unintended consequence. Once I started the Truth Bomb Tuesdays, I did have a couple of people
Mm-hmm.
who were uncomfortable with it and didn't appreciate sort of the message that I was sending out. And that was nice for Kaylee to see as well,
Right.
because I wanted her to be prepared that not everyone is going to take this information so well, right? And it
Mhm.
is something that we're still sort of struggling with. And so
Mhm.
I wanted her to see that, it's okay, you don't have to change everybody's mind. But I did have an overwhelming amount of people who did sort of reach out to me and say, thank you so much for sharing this. And this resonated so much with us
Right.
in our lives or with our family members or other people that we know.
Mhm.
And even for that, for Khayali to see that even just that little bit of positivity that came out of that, you know,
Right, that we're all connected. There's a common humanity here, right? Where people do come together and people can recognize that there's a need, there's a space for this, and you're not walking in this alone.
yes, and that there is I mean, it's bad to say silver lining to the cloud because I don't want to minimize sort of the pain that comes along
The
with
angst.
depression, the angst of
Right.
it, right?
Right.
So I don't want to
Yes.
minimize it, but having said that, there are some lessons that we can take from it, and those lessons that
Sure.
we can learn from each other, right? And we do that through storytelling.
Mhm.
That's part of sort of what we've forgotten about with our ancestors, right? So with our ancestors, anytime they had a lesson to sort of teach, whether it was to the next generation or whatever, it was always done through storytelling, and we've forgotten about that, and it's nice to know that we can listen to each other's stories and our stories can help each other, and her
Mhm.
story has value, that what
Mhm.
she's going through has some value to it, has
Mhm.
some purpose to it, and will in the end have have a great outcome to it. There is a reason for it.
Right. So, you know, it's so great that you've taken all sides, like the good, bad, and the ugly, like all of it, and you've integrated this into a way of looking into, not just the pain and your process, but you're looking at lessons as well. And so, tell me more about how this impacted you having gone through this, like as a parent watching your child go through what she went through.
It's really, really, really scary when you see your child in that deep of a depression and that
Mm-hmm.
deep pain, and you know you can't fix it for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we all have these moments where our child has a medical emergency, and we go in there, and I'm not even a mama bear. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my kids call me a mama llama. Like, I will, if you mess with my kids, I will kick you, I will spit on you. Like, I full on turn into a mama llama, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've had these moments. I remember when Kaylee was really young. She had a really, really, really unusual, rare autoimmune disorder that nobody could figure out. And I remember, telling my husband, no, we need to keep marching her back into the emergency room because this is not normal. Or,
Mm-hmm.
one time when we thought that she had sprained her ankle, and I was like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
this is a break. And I had to convince and advocate for my child and convince the doctor that she needed an x-ray. And it was, in fact, a broken bone, right? So
Right.
it's and but then we found out what it was. We gave her, for the autoimmune disorder, we gave her steroids. For the broken ankle, we put her in a cast. We figured out what the problem was, we solved it, and then it was all fine. This is
Mm-hmm.
not like that. Depression just doesn't work that way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everything had to be her idea. So it had to be her
Mm-hmm.
idea to go to the doctor. It had to be her
Mm-hmm.
idea to see a counselor, right? This goes back to, my journey is her journey. I was sort of along for the ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it had to be her who did the work with the counselor. It had to be her who figured out what her triggers were and noticed the signs of an upcoming episode. It wasn't enough that I would sit there and I would say, Kayali, I think you're starting to slide into another episode. She would just look at me like, what do you mean, right? She really
Mm-hmm.
had to do this on her own, and she'd figure out her own coping skills and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough because you have to relinquish control, and it's really hard for mama llamas to do that. All I could
Mm-hmm.
do was sort of sit on the side and provide her with unconditional love and support, and just sort of watch her journey unfold. And especially because I had been on a very similar journey and gone through a similar process, I wanted to scream, like, I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing this for 30 odd years. I know that you need to do this. I know that
Right.
you need to do that. Like, why don't you
Right.
just listen? And then
Mm-hmm.
she'd be like, no, mom. And she'd have a session with her therapist. And then she'd come back and she'd be like, I think I'm going to try this. And I'm like, I feel like I told you that 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
it was her journey. It needed to be her journey. But oh my God, as a parent watching your child do this, it is scary. You don't know what the
Mm-hmm.
outcome's going to be. Just you're on eggshells. It is just very, very, very
Right.
scary.
Yeah, it's like she had to learn in her own way. And, I really appreciate the way that you provide this open space to Khayali, to her to converse and dialogue with her about whatever is going on. And, allowing her to express her emotions, regulated or not. I'm sure she can appreciate that, right? So like you gave her the space, so she has to say something or not say something, whatever part of the process she's in. But that's one less thing she has to worry about. Like, oh, how are they going to react if I have a reaction? And, it seems like you were very much unconditionally accepting and, letting her know that she doesn't have to have it all figured out. And then what you've just really explained about the relinquishing control. So no matter how difficult or challenging it must have been, you still did it. And that takes a great deal of bravery and courage to not give in to an urge like that. You just said, oh my goodness, how difficult that was. And, you're a parent. And as parents, you're wired to protect and fend for your child at all cost, right? So I'm curious, like, what helped you, Neilin, with those urges? And like, what did you notice that helped decrease the urge to act and take charge for Khayali? I know you said like you recognize that she had to do it, but what helped you with the urge every time you wanted to do something?
Like I think this goes back to the fact that I had this similar journey to her, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the blessings and the gratitude that comes out of my depression, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
grateful because I had that firsthand experience of what it's like to be in the space that she was in. I remember those feelings. I remember, even the frustration when other people didn't understand me or when, I wasn't getting what I needed. And so by remembering that and remembering how that made me feel, I automatically knew that that's what Khayali was feeling, right? So
Right.
Khayali would come home and, she would say something and I would turn to her and I would say, okay, I know how I want to respond to you. Now you tell me how you want me to respond to you. So that would be one of the
Right.
questions that we would ask, right? Like, are you saying this because you want me to help solve the problem? Or are you saying this because you
Mm-hmm.
want me to just sit here and listen? Do you want me to empathize with you? Like, what is it that you're looking from me? And
Right.
just putting it back on her, right? And
Mm-hmm.
even as a parent, I mean, sometimes, and we know that this comes with depression. She's got depression, she's got anxiety, she's also got hormones because she's a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes she gets
Teenager.
cranky, right?
Right.
And as a parent, you're like, I really got to nip that in the bud. And then you sort of step back and you're like, okay, but I remember when all those times that I
Right.
was cranky, like this is not one of those times that you need to correct it. You let it go. Or
Mm-hmm.
I know that one of the symptoms of depression is you're you're really not motivated to do much, right?
Right.
So as a parent, I'm supposed to tell Kaylee to clean her room. But if she's not in a space where she can clean her room,
Mm-hmm.
I need to let it go. There's only so
Mm-hmm.
many things that she can do. So, there would be
Right.
days that she would say, I don't have it in me to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, it sounds so counterintuitive, but you just sort
Right.
of sit there and you're like, okay, I get it. I remember those days that I could not go to school. So I'm just going to trust you. And I'm going to say, if you say that you can't go to school, or you say you can't clean your room, or you say you can't take a shower today, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, or you don't want to get out of bed today, I believe you. And I really just sort of had to say, I believe unconditionally, absolutely everything that she's telling me. She is not lazy. She is not tired. She is depressed. And it's an
Mm-hmm.
illness. It's the same way as if she had, God forbid, cancer and was too tired to get out of bed, right? We would
Right.
never sort of question that. And so I had to learn to not question that. And so
Right.
she knew that I unconditionally trusted her and she could say and do whatever she wanted and it
Right.
would be okay. Worst case scenario, she missed
Yeah.
a day of school. But on the flip side, it's what she needed.
Right. Yeah, you're being able to recall your experience and recognize your unmet needs, and then taking that stance and learning not to question and really saying, I believe unconditionally everything she's telling me. I really like the analogy that you made with cancer, right? So if we had a family member with cancer, you're right. We wouldn't question any of these things if they were feeling fatigued, not well, unable to. And so your resilience and ability to do that in this way for your daughter, this is incredible.
And I think you have to recognize that also, most people with depression or anxiety will tell you that they question themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, they question themselves. They also feel unworthy. So they also will automatically go to, what is wrong with me? I must be so lazy and so stupid and so unworthy. So if I
Right,
know that this is what's going on in her head and she's already questioning it, and
right.
then I, as her parent and her source of comfort and support, also questions it, at the end of the
Oh,
day,
it's
it's
debilitating.
debilitating. It's doing more harm
Yeah.
than good, right?
Right. But the fact that you could recognize that, that's where the beauty is in this, is that you took steps back, not just to focus on the tree, right? But you were able to look at the whole forest. You could look at the whole picture and go, okay, here's my plan. Here's my game plan. Here's what I recognize about what I need to do in this situation to really be there for her. And it seems like it was so clear for you. That's impeccable.
Truly, it was only because I saw myself. I saw myself, I saw my own journey, and those 30 some odd years where, and I've spoken publicly about this, but I would
Hmm.
say for every single day for almost 30 years, there was not a single day that I woke up and was happy to be awake. Every single morning, I for 30 years, I woke up and said, "Oh my, why did I have to wake up and have one more day?" And I
Right.
would say that as difficult as that was,
Hmm.
I am so grateful for all
Hmm.
of that, because I agree with you. I think the reason that I was able to sort of see Kayali and her journey differently was
Hmm.
because I remembered how I felt.
Hmm.
And had I not had that journey, I don't know that I would have been able to respond to Kiali the way that I have. I hope it's
Hmm.
been a positive reaction to her. I don't know. She says it has, but
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure I've made mistakes, just trying to do
Hmm.
the best that I can. But I do think that I have been able to relate to her in the way that I have because of what I went through. And that makes me
Hmm.
so grateful for that journey.
Sure. And so, as a parent going through this journey, witnessing your teenage daughter going through what she has gone through, would you say that you're looking back in the middle or just getting started?
So, one of the things that I've learned about depression is I don't think it ever fully goes away, at least not when you're talking about, major depressive disorder, which is what Kayali and I have been diagnosed with. I think it
Hmm.
really does sort of end up being a lifelong thing that you
Hmm.
live with. And this is why even, earlier I always refer to my stage of my depression as remission.
Hmm.
I hope I'm cured, but we're just going to call it a remission because you never know what's going to come up again. So
Hmm.
for Kaylee, I do feel like we're in the middle of it because I do think it's going to be a lifelong issue with her.
Hmm.
I hope that she never has another depressive episode, but I really don't know. And it's tough because, Kaylee's in grade 12 right now, and she's quite
Hmm.
adamant that she wants to go away to university. Like, this is a strong, independent woman. She wants to go
Hmm.
out into the world and do her thing. And we absolutely want her to do that too. And so she's looking at the States, she's looking at the UK, she's looking at out
Hmm.
of province. But I have to
Right.
say, as a parent, I'm scared to death,
Of
but
course.
also, how do you hold her back, right? You can't say, okay, well, I don't want you to do this because I'm scared for you, right? And
Hmm.
it's not anything specific that she's done or that she's relayed, but again, because of the way my journey unfolded and I remember those feelings and what I was having, I think I'm just sort of hyper vigilant, and that just sort of adds to the fear that I'm feeling right now with where she is. So I
Hmm.
worry about her. I worry about what decisions she's going to make. Like, is she going to make a reckless decision just to shake up the numbness, right? Is she
Hmm.
is she going to turn to alcohol? Is she going to turn to the wrong person for comfort and get taken advantage of? And
Hmm.
you know, I mean, right now, she's kind of coming out of a depressive episode, but in that
Mm-hmm.
depressive episode there was a lot of sleeping, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the symptoms. And it
Right.
brought me back to when she was a newborn and we first brought her home from the hospital, and she's
Mm-hmm.
our first child, so you're a little bit more afraid
Yeah, everything is
with
a
the first one,
surprise.
right? Everything is a
Everything is a
surprise.
surprise.
Yeah, yeah. They're just very breakable, and you're just very scared of everything.
Right.
And
It's a fragile, there's a fragility, and oh, it's a newborn. There's so much fragility attached to it, right? So,
exactly. So,
mm-hmm.
I put her down in her crib, and I remember I would, and she really didn't sleep a lot. But when she did sleep, I would, sneak into her room, and I would kind of look at her to make sure her chest was moving up and down and that she was still breathing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then because she was such a horrible sleeper, when she finally did start sleeping, I would panic. I'd be like, oh my goodness, she's been asleep for like 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. And I would sneak into her room, and I'd be like, and I would, put, a piece of glass just underneath her nose. Oh yeah, it's fogging up. Great. She's breathing. She's fine. And you think, and then, she starts to get older and older, and you look back to those moments, and you laugh at it the same way we're laughing now, because it is,
Right.
it's almost comical, right?
Well, you were doing what you felt you needed to do in that moment to make sure that your daughter was breathing. So you were being creative.
Exactly. But what you don't expect is that your 17-year-old daughter
Mm-hmm.
is going to sleep in the morning, and you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have that same sense of panic. Like,
Right.
why
Mm-hmm.
is she still sleeping? Why is she still sleeping? Why is she sleeping in? Is she okay? Has something happened? Do I need to check
Mm-hmm.
on her?
Mm-hmm.
She's 17. I this is it So it's such a weird place to be. And right now she's still under my roof, so I can check in on her regularly, right?
Right.
So what happens now? She's on her way. She's going to move out. It's a lot harder for me to check in on her if she sleeps in. And so just the fear of it, and just being in the thick of it.
And if you're also checking in on her when she's sleeping, I mean, you can also wake her up when
Yeah,
she might have been
exactly.
needing the rest.
Exactly. That's the other thing too, right? Like even when she was a baby, my husband would warn me, like, don't wake her up. Like we're finally got her sleeping. What's wrong
Right.
with you?
Yeah.
If you wake her, she's yours for the rest of the night. Like don't hand her off, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
same
Mm-hmm.
thing here. You know that she needs to sleep. You don't want to disturb her. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of fear and just a lot of worry. And is she going to be okay? And by the same token, I was not in a great place when I moved away and went to university. And, it just, I was building the coping skills with her. We know that she's building the coping skills. We're giving her the tools that she needs right now. So she
Mm-hmm.
is actually going to go into adulthood sort of already pre-armed with a lot of the coping skills that other adults tend to not have. So in that way she is a bit ahead. And
Right.
we keep saying, technology. I know we all poo poo technology, but at least I know that if Kayali's not in a great place,
Right.
she can WhatsApp me, she can text me, she can call me.
Yeah, we didn't have those things when we were in school. Like that wasn't like cell phones was like an emergency use thing, and you wouldn't have a cell phone really. Only like like
Yeah,
we didn't have all of the easy ways to instant message someone,
exactly.
and we have that now. So you're right. There's a balance with social media as well, but it does allow us to help keep in check and know that there's this avenue of communication that we didn't have before.
And because we talk about it so much, and because we have so many conversations at home, I do think that she will reach out
Mm-hmm.
to me, or to her dad, or to her brother, or to
Yeah.
somebody. And that's the other thing you have to let go as well, is as
Mm-hmm.
much as you want to be that person,
Yeah.
you're not always going to be.
But as long as there is a person, right? And as long as
Exactly.
you've equipped her enough to know that there is a person for her,
Yes.
right?
And you have to take that ego of parent out of it, because we
Right.
have had to tell her that, listen, it doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be your dad. It doesn't have to be your brother, but you do have to reach out to someone.
Like a person, somebody, right?
And I'm not going to lie, as a parent, sometimes it hurts your feelings.
Of
Sometimes it
course.
hurts your feelings when they pick somebody else over you. But
Of course,
again,
it's a
this
bruise.
is
It's a
not my
big bruise.
journey.
Right.
It's not my journey. It's her journey. As long as she's
Mm-hmm.
getting what she's needing, I need to just take my ego and I need to put it aside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so with this whole journey, this whole thing that you describe and and being in the middle of it, what do you want to remember about this process? Because it's been healing for you and it's been therapeutic in a paradoxical way, right? So there must be a part of the process that you want to remember. Yeah, what do you want to remember about this process and your healing?
I want to remember every single moment of it. There is not a single moment or memory that I want to erase. And I just think because every single moment that we have is
Mhm.
a blessing and also a lesson, right? And so, again, with my
Mhm.
depression, there's so many things that came out of it that I'm
Mhm.
so grateful for that I don't want to forget any of it. I want to remember all of it. And it's the same thing with Khayali and with this journey that I've been on with her. And I hope
Mhm.
she says the same thing about her journey too, right? Is
Mhm.
even all the difficult moments, the happy moments, they all mean so much because it's
Mhm.
such a holistic and cumulative effect, right?
Right.
And I don't want to forget any of it. I want to remember all of it. I want to remember the sad cuddles, but I also want to remember the happy cuddles. I want to
Sure.
remember it all. Yeah.
When you say it that way, remember all the moments, it reminds me of a quote that's really special to my heart. And it's one of the quotes that I shared in the first episode. And this quote is by Maya Angelou. And I'm going to share it with you because it really feels like it picks up exactly what you're saying here. And the quote says, "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty."
I love that.
Yeah. And so the fact that you want to remember all the moments is the rare aspect that we don't always admit to,
Yeah.
right? We don't
Yeah.
always go back to. And the fact that you want to keep that alive, it's very humbling, very humbling.
I try and remind myself I am who I am today and I am where I am today because of everything I've been through,
Hmm.
not in spite of.
Right.
And I really like who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Own it.
Hmm.
And, I know throughout our conversation so far, you've given us little snippets about, all of the different things that you have gratitude for that have come up along the way. You've talked about lessons and life skills and the resilience and just being able to understand the thick of things and the fact that you have this knowledge, this unique knowledge that maybe another parent doesn't have, and that this helps you to be equipped to equip her to help your daughter the way that you know how to, because you know what worked for you and what didn't work for you. And the fact that you can recall those experiences and move forward with that to help her, it seems so essential. But is there anything else that you want to mention in terms of something that you are grateful for with encountering this journey?
You know, I think parents who have a child who is going through any sort of mental health crisis,
Mm-hmm.
it's really difficult and it's
Mm-hmm.
exhausting and it's frustrating. And, for me, one of the greatest gratitudes was the timing and the way that it unfolded. So I have to say that, you know, it was as my journey with depression ended
Mm-hmm.
that Kayali's began. So the timing of it was just unbelievable because
Mm-hmm.
to see your child go through this, you have to be strong yourself. You have to be able to take care of your. There's a reason why in an airplane, they will say put your mask on first before you put on
Mm-hmm.
somebody else's. And so you really
Mm-hmm.
do need to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else.
Right.
Because if mama breaks, mama's just no good to anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was because of the timing of it, because I was coming out of my
Mm-hmm.
depression and into my remission,
Mm-hmm.
although I was mentally exhausted and tired and frustrated, it was normal sadness and normal anger and normal frustrated. It wasn't that depression fog sort of state. So I was able to sort of, see the light from the dark and make those decisions. And because when you're in depression and you're in that fog, your
Mm-hmm.
your thinking is really clouded and
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
there's all these terms that therapists throw out, learned helplessness, and all these
All the
sort of
psychobabble,
all the
right?
psychobabble, right?
Right.
And all of that psychobabble basically means that you cannot trust your feelings, your intuitions, your thoughts, your assumptions. Just none of it can be trusted. And I was out of that. So I could have the appropriate thoughts and I could have the appropriate reactions and emotions. And not that when you're
Mm-hmm.
not in
Mm-hmm.
depression, you're always happy. There were times that I was
Mm-hmm.
sad and frustrated and upset for Khayali. But again, I knew that they were just, I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see it because it's a podcast. But
Right.
air quotes, normal
Mm-hmm.
emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of gratitude for that. I don't think that I would have had the capacity to do that had I not had that timing. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say to parents, like, just, take care of yourself, make sure you're taking care of yourself, and let go. Just let go of the control. Let other people help
Mm-hmm.
you. I send my kid to school because I have no idea what to do with cosine and sine, and I don't know what chemical reactions are going to come out of something. I don't know these things. So I send them to school to learn from
Mm-hmm.
professionals. I didn't teach my kid how to ice skate. I sent them
Mm-hmm.
to lessons. When Kayali broke her ankle, I didn't try to put
Mm-hmm.
a cast on it. I sent her to a doctor to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's not my job to be all of those things. And so I think parents really just be your kid's parent. Trust the professionals, trust your community, build your community. We talked to the school a lot, and the school was very, very, very helpful. We trusted the medical system. So you really sort of, relinquish control, know that it's going to be okay. Be your child's parent because
Mm-hmm.
you are the only parent that they're going to have,
Mm-hmm.
and let everybody else sort of figure it out for them and
Mm-hmm.
take that journey with them, and just have patience. It's all going to work out, I promise.
You know, the way you talk about how you've sorted through all of this, even with the mental health condition, as in the depression, it seems like from everything you've described, you might not have been impacted in any such way where you had an acute flare up or anything like that, but you have been able to articulate how the emotional impact is there. And when you're impacted emotionally, it does impact your mental health in a different way, but it may not necessarily trigger a response like an acute response of your depression, right? So the feeling of emotionally being drained and mentally exhausted and everything revolving around your daughter and keeping her as a priority. I'm sure you didn't even have downtime. I'm sure there were moments where maybe there was those feelings of being anxious and frustrated and just that fatigue, but it's all part of the process. And the way you describe going through it and the way you talk about the distorted thinking that can come up when you're in that fog, I think it's so important that you mention all of those things. And I know that you've already started to give tips to our listeners of the show and the parents going through this in terms of some things that they should pay attention for. Do you have any other messages for the listeners of the show today?
Pick your priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
We live in this sort of social media filtered world, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's sort of part of it. There's all these expectations for us, right? If your kid's room is messy because they couldn't get to it, fine.
Mm-hmm.
If there are dishes in the sink because you couldn't get to it because you are exhausted, fine. If your
Mm-hmm.
family didn't get a home cooked meal, there is a reason that all of these food delivery apps exist. Use them.
Mm-hmm.
We try to do too much.
Right.
And it doesn't always have to be that way, right? I mean, this is part of the
Mm-hmm.
reason why there is stigma attached to things like mental health, because everything's supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to live in a perfect life. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
not perfect, then keep it to yourself. And I would say,
Right.
let's maybe redefine what your definition of perfect is. Maybe perfect is, you know, as a family sitting on the couch under a blanket with lots of tissues, all ugly crying together, while there is a stack of dishes and
Mm-hmm.
takeout containers in the kitchen. It's
Mm-hmm.
fine. It's
Yeah.
fine. Just one step at a time, figure out what's really important, and just don't worry about the rest.
Mm-hmm. I really like your messaging around how difficult it is to relinquish control, but then it actually allows you to stay in control when you own the stance. And I really hear how much you can still advocate by being on the sidelines and that you can actually advocate better. And I also think that your message about unconditional love and support are hugely important for listeners, both teenagers going through this and parents and anyone else. The unconditional support, whatever that looks like, I think that's what people need to know, especially when we look at breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. You know, when you talk about things being perfect, and if it's not perfect, then we should just not talk about it or hide it, right? That's the tucking away that I was mentioning. So, this is where we start breaking down the parts of what needs to be broken down for these barriers to sort of lift. And I really like how you've been able to articulate that. I can only imagine how helpful this will be to the listeners.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope so. I hope someone takes something out of it. I mean, again, we are humans are creatures of storytelling and learning through
Mm-hmm.
storytelling, and if somebody hears something in my story or Khayali's story that resonates with them, then that's worth it, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm also curious about what is your game changer inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story? So, would there be like a quote or a book or something that speaks to you?
So when I started doing the Truth Bomb Tuesdays,
Mm-hmm.
there was a hashtag that I would attach, and I would attach it to all of the Truth Bomb Tuesdays that I posted because it felt relevant to all of them, and it was hashtag depression is my blessing. And
Wow.
it sounds so counterintuitive
Mm-hmm.
because depression's supposed to be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I did air quotes around
Yeah.
bad thing.
Yeah.
um, but it can be a struggle and it can be difficult while you're in it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's when you come out of it and you see sort of the things that evolved and the things that came out of
Mm-hmm.
it and the gratitude, you do sort of realize that without sugarcoating it and without minimizing the pain of depression
Mm-hmm.
and anxiety, because I definitely don't want to do that. I don't want to just sort of, you know, cloud over it.
Right.
There are some blessings that can come out of it. I think there are blessings that can come out of almost anything. So I try
Right.
to sort of go into it and think of everything with, hashtag depression is my blessing. And I hope that
Right.
one day Kayali can say the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. I hope that one day she
Mm-hmm.
feels herself again, and I
Right.
hope that she looks back at it as a blessing, and that there were some good things that sort of came out of it. And I think she's starting to see some of that because I keep saying it so much. I hope, and in her TED Talk, she talks about some of that. So it does give me hope that she
Mm-hmm.
will see some light at the end of her tunnel as well. And I
Right.
hope everybody gets light at the end of their tunnel.
Awesome. You know, it's like you're saying, it sucks to see my kids suffer, with whatever
Yeah.
their journey is, but it will be a blessing for their own discovery. That's what I hear when you talk about your hashtag depression is my blessing. And, that suffering does translate.
Yeah.
Earlier in our conversation, you alluded to something that is very much empowering your child, your teenager, to take control. And this is when you were very direct about, so what do you need from me in this moment? So knowing that you might have an urge to do it differently, you're setting that urge aside and saying, I am still going to take action, but I'm really directing it here. I'm really laser focused. So I think that's really inspirational to hear and just to see how you're actioning it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so, is there a cause or an organization that you feel has been impactful to you on your journey that you might want to give a shout out to?
So I do think that, the whole relationship of a parent seeing a child go through their own mental health struggles
Mm,
and journey, I'm not sure that that is fully been sort of embraced yet.
mm-hmm.
So there wasn't really sort of anywhere that I could turn to, and I think that that's starting to change now, and I
Right.
hope that that's changing. I think it's still
Mm-hmm.
grassroots, right? So
Yeah,
I would
there are
say
some
that there
shifts, but
exact
it,
yeah.
it takes time.
So I wouldn't say that there was a particular organization or something that I could go to, but
Mm-hmm.
from a grassroots community level, I would say I would give a shout out to Callie's school. Like they were amazing to work with, like just phenomenal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the community that Kayali has built around herself in terms of her friends have been phenomenal. our family and our community and how they've come together, the medical system, right? Like it's just, I remember being a child being taken to a child psychiatrist's office, and it was such a different experience than when I
Mm-hmm.
took Khayali, right? So just
Right.
shout out to the medical system for what they're doing and the way that they're doing, the therapists that have worked with Khayali. Like it's just such a little community that has
Mm-hmm.
had such an impact. And I would say that I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody should sort of see what's around them, because I do think that there are a lot of people who are willing to support and help. I mean, even just the school. I think people
Yeah.
would be surprised how helpful the school is willing to be.
Yes,
Really,
I think
truly.
it's so, yes, I do think it's so important for people to hear you say that because, there are those who really, those people, they just don't know who to trust. They don't even know sometimes who to lean on or what support is even best for them. And getting those external resources, like you said, whether it's from school or even family members and the medical system and the mental health professionals, all of those combined, that support really does integrate well with whatever the struggle may be.
Hmm. Even just asking other parents. So
Yes.
when Kaylee's her TED Ed talk was released,
Mm-hmm.
and the school sort of gave a shout out to it,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how many parents at the school reached out to me and said, we are in a similar situation. Can we go
Right.
for a walk? Can we go for a coffee?
Amazing.
And so even just that, like just asking
Yeah.
parents and putting it out there and saying, hey, is anybody else going through this? Does anybody want to talk about this? Can we figure this
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I see that as like big little risks, right? So they're big because they're action steps that we don't tend to take, but they're little because it's a simple step that helps us achieve so much. And I'm so glad you had that experience. It's just so nice to hear that that's the kind of feedback that you got from your community. That's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So, Nailin, this was such a real and essential conversation to have, especially from the parent perspective. I also want to thank you for trusting your process that guided you to be open and to share such intricate details and letting your voice lead the way to this journey, this duality between you and your daughter. And, thank you for being a part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. This was so helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to do this. Thank you for having this platform available where something like this can happen. I think it's so important and it's so amazing to see.
It's been my pleasure. This really is, I'm really hopeful that this will help others to come forward and to tell a story of their own. I know that I had the privilege of speaking with your daughter first, and this led me to ask you. And so, there are a number of guests that have been asked to be on the show, but I'm hoping that with time, we'll be able to have people come forward and show their braveness and know that the braveness is a big little step into a direction that really helps them get to a place that helps them feel freer.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.